Hello, I'm Leonardo Puglisi. Welcome to Uncensored, right here on 6 News, where we go in depth with a key newsmaker about issues that matter to them and matter to you. Tonight we ask the hard questions to ACT Chief Minister Andrew Barr, discussing the past 20 plus years of Labor in government in the capital, his term as Chief Minister so far and whether he'll continue after the election, and the coalition agreement with the Greens. I spoke with him a little earlier. Chief Minister Andrew Barr, thanks very much for joining us.
Oh, great to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, very great to have you here. So look, Labor came to power in 2001 in the ACT. It's been in power since then, looking at a 7th term now, which is, of course, quite remarkable, especially you look at the changing governments in every other state and territory. For those who might not be as familiar with Canberra politics, why do you think it is that your party has been able to stay in government for so long, apart from obviously the reason that you are able to be supported in a minority government?
Yeah, so our electoral system, the Hare-Clark system, does generally produce minority governments or hung parliaments. There's generally always a crossbench, and so there's almost two contests within every election between the major parties, Labor and Liberal, on who can win the most seats or the highest share of the vote. And then a contest amongst minor parties and independents for the crossbench. What has generally happened in the ACT is that Labor has won the contest against the Liberals on the number of seats between the two major parties, and crossbench members have generally been left off centre and have been quite explicit during election campaigns that they wouldn't seek to form government with the Liberals. And that's been the basis, particularly for the Greens political party, of their ability to win seats in the Assembly. They win one or two on their own primary vote, but a lot of the time they're winning the last seat in each territory electorate on Labor preferences. And it's important for Labor voters to know that the minor party that they're preferencing after Labor would support a Labor government. The one time in ACT self-governing history where the Liberals governed, and they did so for a period of 6 years, was when the crossbench was centre-right, conservative independents who obviously said they would form government with the Liberals. So as we go into this election, well, there will be independents and crossbench candidates running to fill those seats. The community will be expecting that they declare which side of politics they would support to form government.
And I will get to the crossbench shortly as well, because we did speak with the co-founder of Independence for Canberra only yesterday. But you personally, right, you've been in the Assembly and a minister since 2006. You've been Chief Minister since 2014. What can Labor offer in a 7th term of government that they haven't been able to do for the past 20 years?
Well, certainly in the last 4 or 5 years, we've seen our city's population grow very rapidly. The ACT is the fastest growing economy in Australia. So what we are looking to do, and the plan that we will put forward, is to build some of the major infrastructure that Canberra will need as it crosses over a population threshold of 500,000 people in the second half of this decade. We'll be looking to work with the federal government to partner in some of that infrastructure delivery. We haven't had really a partner in the federal government for the entire time I've been Chief Minister. It started when Tony Abbott was Prime Minister, through the Turnbull years and then the Morrison years. The federal Liberals weren't exactly Canberra's best friend. And so it's really only been since the election of the Albanese government federally that we've been able to get underway on a number of very significant projects for Canberra. So what we'll be taking to the 2024 election is a big infrastructure agenda, one that we hope will be jointly funded between the Territory and Commonwealth governments. As it relates to things like social policy reform, the big issue before the Territory Parliament this year will be voluntary assisted dying legislation. and I anticipate that will take up most of the sitting weeks over the course of the first half of this year. It's a very significant issue for the community, one that there's a conscience vote in the Territory Parliament. So what we'll be taking forward, a big infrastructure agenda, continued national leadership and social policy reform, and of course the ACT has tended to be the first mover in areas of climate change response, for example.
As I said before, right, you've been in the Assembly for quite a while now. You are currently the longest serving Australian leader. So many leaders since 2020, we know the COVID years, the National Cabinet have cited exhaustion for when they leave. Why is it that you have stayed on? You're obviously running for re-election now, but of course, theoretically, you could retire, there'd be a count back, no by-election, and that'd be that. So why continue?
Well, I think I'm a little younger than most of the colleagues who have retired recently. I've only just turned 50, so I've still got a few more years left in me. I was very clear to say that the election of the Albanese federal government did provide a real sort of boost in the arm for wanting to continue in this role, because a range of things that I've been wanting to do for some time either hit the roadblock of no Commonwealth government support, and then COVID hit, and obviously a lot of things went on hold for several years whilst we managed the pandemic. But I'm really looking forward to this year and this election campaign. I recognise, obviously, in a sporting, to use a sporting analogy, that I'm certainly in the second half of my career. But I'm 50. If I were Joe Biden's age, I think that would be a very legitimate question, and people would be saying, what is an 80-year-old doing seeking re-election? But in this instance, I'm still young. I've still got a lot to contribute, and look forward to doing so together with my Labor colleagues.
We know plans change, but is your plan right now to stay on for a full term if you were re-elected in October?
Well, look, I think the very clear and honest answer to that is election campaigns are a lot of work. There is a lot that goes into winning an election, and if we were fortunate enough to win, I wouldn't have gone through all of that just to walk away shortly after. So my intention, I was asked this question 4 years ago, is that you are elected for a 4-year term, and so the time you make decisions about your next 4 years, if you like, or when the party goes through its pre-selection process, when you need to actually nominate again for public office. So from where we stand now, definitely 4 years, and then I'll make a decision about my future at some point ahead of the 2028 election.
Turning back to what we said at the start of this and how you guys are forming government, Labor has obviously been supported by the Greens for a while, more formally in more recent years, and certainly since you've been Chief Minister. Is that something that is going to continue after the election if needed, and would you like to see it continue?
Well, I think there are benefits in having a publicly available written agreement that outlines, I guess at the start, really confidence and supply, but then also in our parliamentary agreement with the Greens political party, then goes to a shared policy platform. That effectively was an assessment of the commitments that both parties had taken to the 2020 election. There was a little bit of compromise on both sides in order to forge an agreement. But it certainly has given us and the community a very clear understanding of the things that we've committed to do, and a checklist, a degree of accountability of have we delivered on those shared commitments. So that is, I think, a pretty good model for coalition government. I look at it, perhaps contrast that with the secret agreements that the Liberal and National parties have at a federal and often at a state level, where they do seek to form government together, or would say that the model we have here in the ACT is more transparent. But it doesn't necessarily mean that in every single parliamentary term that is the pathway you would pursue. But what happens in the territory, which is again different from the states, is that after the election, the Assembly sits for the first time and members vote for who the Chief Minister will be. So in a state context, often you'd have a Premier needing to convince the state governor that they had a majority on the floor of the House of Assembly. In our situation, that has to be proven on the first sitting day with a vote. And so with that basis, having a written agreement, I think, is important because that gives durability over the course of a parliamentary term. And again, I've demonstrated through this term and one previously the capacity to manage a minority government or coalition situation with another political party with stability. There hasn't been the churn of ministers or leaders in the ACT that we've certainly seen at a federal level or indeed in other jurisdictions.
Granted, obviously the ACT is different, as you just outlined there, and obviously Hare-Clark, which is also probably why Tasmania was the only other place we've really seen a Labor Greens alliance, although that isn't in place now, obviously. Do you think, speaking as someone who's led that coalition in a way since 2014, since you became Chief Minister, is it possible for that kind of model with tweaks to work outside of the ACT, or is that one that is really just only applicable to Canberra?
Well, I think it's most applicable in a Hare-Clark system where, all things being equal, that's what the electorate is going to return in terms of parliamentary representation. The next Tasmanian state election will be interesting with an expansion to 35 members that I think almost ensures that neither major party will have a majority in their own right. So what you see in the ACT may well become commonplace in Tasmania again. At state level, where they have single member electorates, it seems less likely that that's a long-term governing model. It might happen in one parliamentary term, but it would seem that relatively small changes in primary or two-party preferred votes in single-member electorate systems can deliver quite significantly different seat hauls for the various parties. Whereas if Hare-Clark really requires a big swing for a seat to change. In our system, 5 electorates, 5 members each. Really, there's one seat in play in every election in each electorate, sometimes 2, but mostly you could confidently say that Labor and Liberal are going to win. In this instance, it's 19 of 25 seats. In previous parliaments, it's been 20 or 21 of the 25 seats. Sometimes even as high as 23 of the 25. So I think if history is any guide, the model will stay the same in the ACT, but perhaps not so applicable in other jurisdictions.
Just finally, only yesterday, Independence for Canberra launched. Here's a bit of what their co-founder Thomas Emerson had to say when we spoke to him on 6 News.
Independents elected under the Independence for Canberra banner would be free to operate and vote independently, including in choosing which potential Chief Minister to support. What I would say is we need a Chief Minister who's dedicated to delivering better results for our community. We don't have that at the moment.
So what do you make of that?
Well, look, I guess I would disagree, obviously, with his assessment. He's free to hold that view. It's one that I don't think is shared by the majority of Canberrans. If the last several elections are any guide, but it will be tested ultimately at the ballot box later in October. I'm not going to play political games and slanging matches with Thomas. I don't think I've actually ever met him. I know who he works for, and I have a great level of respect for Senator Pocock. So I'm not going to get into a slagging match with one of his staff members at this point. I'll wish Thomas all the best in the campaign. He will no doubt robustly contest the election like more than 100 other candidates.
He did just say as well, and obviously you mentioned David Pocock there, and obviously not just did he work for him, but obviously he had that success, Senator Pocock, only less than 2 years ago. Do you worry that the
Yes,
independents?
Like I said, the Pocock, one of my preferences almost immediately after voting Labor. So I was very pleased that Senator Pocock was elected.
Yeah. Do you worry though that independents might be giving Labor a run for their money in some of these seats? When obviously you had a campaign event only over the weekend, and are you worried? Yeah. So are you worried that they might take some of your seats or potentially side with the Liberals, which he says, if elected, their members would be free to choose which chief minister they back?
Yeah, well, look, I think it's important that independents declare early in the process who they are supporting. And I think that's the honest and straightforward way to approach the electorate so that there's no surprises. So people know they're voting for an independent who's going to support a Liberal government. They know that from the outset, rather than that coming as a surprise and people presenting, or independents presenting to the community that they would support Labor or that they are centre left-leaning, only to do the opposite. On the substantive question, well, look, Hare Clark is clearly a contest between major parties, minor parties and independents. Generally speaking, that history has shown that the contest for the crossbench is a very fierce one. At the moment, if you like, what you describe as marginal seats in the ACT are all held by the Greens political party. So it might be Greens members who are more at risk from independence than Labor. But of course, time will tell. We don't take anything for granted. What I do know is that Labor has around 3,000 members in the ACT, and that those members will be actively supporting our 25 candidates. And the best way to maximise your vote in an election is to have great policies and communicate them well. And I'm confident that we'll put forward really good policies in this election campaign, and that our candidates, backed by our very large grassroots membership, will be out there having hundreds of thousands of conversations with ACT voters between now and election day in October. We'll do our best and we'll see what happens.
Chief Minister Andrew Barr, really appreciate the chat. Hope we can catch up again before the election. Thanks very much.
Terrific. Thank you very much.
Well, if you'd like to see more from Uncensored, you can, of course, stream every episode right now on the 6 News YouTube channel. Just search 6NewsAU to find us, and go to our website as well, SIXNewsAU.com. Remember, news headlines on the hour, every hour here on 6 News, so watch live whenever you want. I'm Leonardo Puglisi. Thanks for tuning in.